$1.9 million. That's the number on the purchase agreement, and your father doesn't know it yet. It's 6:40 on a Tuesday morning in March, and you're sitting in the parking lot of Whitaker Fabrication, engine off, coffee going cold in the cup holder. The lot smells like cut metal and diesel even through the closed windows. Frost on the chain link, same fence your dad drove past for 19 years. The sign is faded now, the W peeling at the corner, and you know exactly which office window belongs to the man who called your father into a room on a Thursday afternoon in 2009 and told him the company was going a different direction. Your dad was 51, he never made that kind of money again. You are 34. And in 11 days, if the financing clears, you will own the room where it happened. Here's what nobody tells you about revenge. It looks exactly like a spreadsheet. Let's go back. Not to 2009, you were a kid, you only remember the quiet. Go back to 8 years ago, when you were 26 and making $41,000 a year as a junior estimator at a competing fab shop 2 towns over. You remember the number because you built your whole life around it. Rent was $890. Your car was a 2011 Ford Focus with 130,000 miles that you bought for $6,200 cash, so you'd never have a payment. You ate the same 4 dinners on rotation, store brand everything. You were not poor exactly, you were precise. There's a difference, and the difference is that poor happens to you, and precise is a thing you do on purpose because you watched what happened when a man stopped being careful. Your father is named Dale. He's the secondary character in your life the way fathers often are, always present, rarely explained. After Whitaker let him go, he took a job driving a parts truck for a plumbing supplier, $16 an hour. He never complained. That was the worst part. He'd come home, hang his keys on the hook, and say the traffic was bad on Route 9, and you both understood that the traffic was bad on Route 9 meant something else entirely. You never talked about the firing, not once in 15 years. That's the silent detail, the thing that lives in the house between you, that you both step around like a piece of furniture bolted to the floor. You promised yourself something when you were 19. You never said it out loud. You're going to keep not saying it for a while longer. The first shift comes at 28, and it comes from a decision, not a windfall. You realize estimating is the whole game. The estimator sees every number, material cost, labor load, margin, the exact spread between what a job costs and what a client pays. Most people at a fab shop never see that spread. You lived inside it 8 hours a day. So you stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like the guy who owns the employee. You took the free version of a bookkeeping course. You read the company's financials that you weren't supposed to see. And you learned the first real thing. A business isn't valued on revenue, it's valued on earnings. Specifically, SDE, seller's discretionary earnings, which is the profit plus whatever the owner pays himself, plus the personal expenses he runs through the company. A shop doing $4 million in revenue might only throw off $400,000 in SDE. The revenue is the noise. The SDE is the signal. That reframe changed how you saw every business you drove past. A restaurant wasn't a restaurant anymore. It was a machine that either did or did not produce discretionary earnings. Sitting on a lease you could read like an X-ray. You get promoted to senior estimator, $58,000, and you do something that surprises you. You don't upgrade your life. You keep the focus. You keep the 4 dinners. Every raise becomes savings, and every dollar of savings goes into a low-cost total market index fund inside a Roth IRA, because you learned the second thing, that the tax you don't pay compounds exactly like the money you do save, and the Roth means the growth comes out clean, no tax on the way out, decades from now. The day you fix the transmission on the Focus without touching the index fund, you sit in the mechanic's lot and something happens in your chest. Not tears, adjacent to tears. You handled a $1,400 problem and it stayed a problem. It never became a crisis. And you realize you'd forgotten that was possible. You'd forgotten a bad day could just be a bad day and not the beginning of the end. That's what money buys first, before it buys anything else. It buys the day back. By 31, you've saved $71,000 and you've done something else, something quiet. You've been driving past Whitaker once a month, just driving past, counting the trucks in the lot. A full lot is a busy shop. You notice the lot getting emptier, because Ray Whitaker, the man from the Thursday afternoon, the man who is now 68, is tired. And a tired owner with no succession plan is the single most important pattern in all of small business acquisition. There are, by the Federal Reserve's estimate, millions of business owners over 60 who have no exit, no kid who wants the shop, no plan except to keep showing up until they can't. They are sitting on their life's work with no way to turn it back into money. That is not a tragedy to the market. That is a liquidity event waiting for a buyer who understands the terms. You understand the terms. Here is where I'd normally give you the next rule, the clean numbered lesson. But there's no rule for what you did next, so I'll just tell you what you did. You applied for a job at Whitaker. not to spy, to learn. You took a pay cut, $54,000, to become their operations lead, and for 2 years you worked inside the building where your father was fired, past the office with the peeling W, and you learned the business from the inside the way no due diligence report could ever teach you. You learned which customers actually paid on time and which ones Ray kept out of loyalty even though they wrecked his cash flow. You learned that the newest press break was 11 years old and the oldest was from before you were born. You learned that Ray's margins were bleeding because he hadn't raised prices since 2019 and was too proud to admit it. And you learned the third thing, the one that separates buyers from dreamers. A business is worth what it earns, discounted for how much of that earning walks out the door with the owner. Whitaker did $3.8 million in revenue and roughly $470,000 in SDE. Small shops like this trade for somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 times SDE, which put the number on paper somewhere between $1.2 and $1.6 million. Ray, in his head, thought the company was worth $4 million because Ray was pricing 19 years of his own sweat, and you cannot buy a man's sweat. You can only buy his earnings. The gap between those two numbers is where every business acquisition is won or lost. Your mother found out you worked there before your father did. She called you from the car so Dale couldn't hear. She didn't ask you why. She asked you if you knew what you were doing, and you said yes, and it was the first lie you told her in years, because you didn't know if you were building a future or digging up a grave. Ray offered to sell to you on a Wednesday in October. You'd made yourself indispensable, which is its own strategy. You become the only person who can run the thing the owner is desperate to escape. He said a number, $2.4 million. He said it like a man who'd rehearsed it in the mirror. You didn't flinch. You'd been waiting 2 years to not flinch. This is the escalation, so pay attention to how the money actually moves, because this is the part the movies get wrong. Nobody hands you $2.4 million. You don't have $2.4 million. You have at this point $128,000 saved. What you have instead is structure. First, the valuation fight. You brought Ray a quality of earnings summary, not an insult, a document. You showed him line by line the customer concentration risk. His top 3 clients were 44% of revenue, and one of them was on month-to-month terms. You showed him the deferred maintenance on the equipment. You weren't attacking his life's work. You were pricing its risk. He came down to $1.9 million, and he came down not because you beat him, but because you were the only buyer who understood the business well enough to keep paying his employees. And Ray, this is the thing you didn't expect. Ray cared about that more than the last $500,000. Then, the stack. An SBA 7A loan covered $1.425 million, 75%, at a rate that made your stomach turn, but a term long enough to make the monthly payment survivable. The SBA doesn't lend the money, a bank does, and the government guarantees most of it, which is the only reason a bank would ever hand that much to a 34-year-old estimator. Your $128,000 went in as equity, the skin the bank required, roughly 10%. And the last piece, the elegant piece, the piece that makes acquisition possible for people who aren't rich, seller financing. Ray carried a note for $285,000 himself. He became your lender. The man who fired your father would now receive a check from you every month for 5 years. And every one of those checks meant he believed you'd succeed, because a seller who finances the sale is betting on the buyer. He is standing behind you in line to get paid. You signed on a Thursday. You noticed it was a Thursday. You didn't say anything. You drove to your parents' house that night to tell your father. You'd imagined this moment for 15 years. The vindication, the look on his face. Here's what actually happened. You sat at the kitchen table where you'd eaten 10,000 dinners, and you told him, you own it now. Whitaker. The whole thing. And Dale was quiet for a long time, turning his coffee mug in a slow circle on the table. And then he said, why would you do that to yourself? Not a question. He didn't even raise it into a question. You'd built an entire life on the assumption that your father wanted revenge, that the silence in the house all those years was a wound waiting for you to avenge it. But your father had made peace with 2009 a decade ago. He'd let it go. And you had spent your 20s and your savings and 2 years of your working life buying back a pain that only you were still carrying. The wound wasn't his, it was yours. You'd just been wearing it as his the whole time. This is the valley, and it isn't the money. The money is fine. The money is, on paper, the best it's ever been. It's that you don't recognize your own father. He came to the shop once, that first month. You wanted to show him the floor, the presses, the office with the peeling W that you were going to repaint. He walked the lines slowly. He nodded at things. And when he got to the corner office, he stopped in the doorway and he didn't go in. He He just looked at the carpet, and you understood, finally, standing behind him, that the room didn't mean to him what it meant to you. To you, it was a throne you'd conquered. To him, it was just a small, ugly room where something sad happened a long time ago. To a younger man he could barely remember being. He left after 20 minutes. Said the traffic gets bad on Route 9 after 4. That's when I have to tell you the most important thing about money, and it has nothing to do with SBA loans. There is a version of wealth building that is really just a way of not feeling something. You can turn grief into a 5-year plan. You can turn a father's humiliation into a spreadsheet with 40 tabs, and the spreadsheet will work. It will actually generate the return, and you will look up one day owning the exact thing you set out to own, and discover the feeling you were chasing was never for sale. Progress measured only in acquisition is a straight line that curves away from the person you built it for. So you do the only actionable thing there is. You restructure. Not the debt, the purpose. You start paying Dale as a consultant. Real money, real work, 2 days a week, because he knows more about metal than anyone you've ever met, and because the checks are a language you can both speak when the words won't come. You elect S-Corp status for the company and start paying yourself a reasonable salary with distributions on top, which saves roughly $19,000 a year in payroll tax. And you funnel a chunk of that into a SEP IRA. And one line item in the new plan, buried in the tab labeled payroll, is Dale's name. That's the reframe. The tax structure isn't about the tax. It's a delivery mechanism for the thing you couldn't say at the kitchen table. Remember Marcus. Marcus was the other senior estimator at your old shop, the one 2 towns over. Same age as you, better talker, sharper suits. When you left to go work at Whitaker for less money, Marcus thought you'd lost your mind. Marcus took a different path. He financed a $67,000 truck and a lake place and lived exactly at the edge of his income the whole way up, because Marcus believed, sincerely, that looking successful and being successful were the same asset. You lost touch. You heard things. Now in the reconstruction, Marcus reappears. He calls you. He heard you bought Whitaker, and he says it with a laugh that isn't quite a laugh. And then he asks, casual, if you're hiring. Marcus got laid off 14 months ago. He's 40 grand into credit card debt at 24%. The lake place is gone, and the truck got voluntarily surrendered, which he tells you is basically the same as selling it, and you don't correct him. You don't correct him because you remember being 26 and precise, and you know that the entire difference between you and Marcus was never intelligence and never talent. It was one decision, made 100 times. The decision to let the money be invisible instead of visible. Marcus bought the appearance of the destination. You bought the vehicle to actually get there. You hire him. Fair wage. He's good at the work. Neither of you ever mentions the phone call again. By the second year, you own the thing outright. Not the debt, that's still there, but the thing itself, the momentum of it. You raised prices 11% and lost exactly one customer, the month-to-month one, the one who was risk anyway. SDE climbs to $610,000. And now you're playing the sophisticated game, the one Ray never learned. The building. You'd been paying rent to Ray's separate holding company, which is standard. The real estate lives apart from the operating business. When Ray's ready to sell the building too, you buy it, and you buy it inside a separate LLC, and now the operating company pays rent to your own real estate LLC, which means you own the income and you own the appreciation, and you're building equity in a hard asset while the tenant, yourself, pays it down. That's how the people who stay wealthy actually structure it. The business makes the money, the real estate keeps it, and your net worth, on paper, crosses into a number you would not have believed at 26 eating store-brand pasta. It doesn't feel like you thought it would. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like quiet. It feels like the specific silence of a shop floor at 6:40 in the morning before anyone else arrives, when the machines are cold and the whole place is just yours, and there's nobody to show it to who would feel what you'd need them to feel. The absence of the old anxiety isn't joy, it's just space, a shape in the air where the fear used to sit. Your father repaints the W himself. You didn't ask him to. You come in one Monday and the sign is fixed, the letter crisp and white, and he's already gone home, and neither of you ever says a word about it. That's the silent detail, come all the way around. It's 6:40 on a Tuesday morning in March. You're sitting in the parking lot of a company you own, engine off, coffee going cold in the cup holder. The lot smells like cut metal and diesel. There's frost on the chain link, the same fence your dad drove past for 19 years. The sign says Whitaker, and the W is white now. You could change the name. It's your company. You could put your own name on the building, erase the man who fired your father, close the loop the way you dreamed of closing it at 19. You've owned it for 2 years and you still haven't done it. Here's the thing the spreadsheet never had a sell for. You can buy back everything that was taken except the years you spent wanting it back. The engine's still off. You haven't gone inside yet. You're deciding whether the name stays.